Look closely at this street. It's 1900, and this is London, the richest, most powerful city on earth. But step off the grand avenues and you'd fall into another world. Crowded slums, streets thick with filth, and coal smoke so heavy it swallowed the sun. This was daily life for millions, trapped in a city still stuck in the Victorian age. But it was all about to change. Over the next 40 years, the old London would be torn down and reborn, with buried railways, grand hotels, and towers of steel and stone. And using AI, I've rebuilt every step of it so you can watch it rise for yourself. Picture London at the dawn of the century. Nearly 6.5 million people were crammed inside it, making it the largest city on the planet, a title it would hold until New York finally surpassed it in 1925. But it did not feel modern. The air hung so thick with coal smoke that pea-soup fogs could blot out the sun and choke people to death in the street. The traffic was still mostly horses, and the skyline was almost completely flat, dominated by one giant, St. Paul's Cathedral, whose dome had stood 365 feet over the city since 1710 and would remain London's tallest building for more than 250 years. Why did nothing rise higher? Because of one furious queen. Back in 1894, a block of flats called Queen Anne's Mansions dared to block Queen Victoria's view of Parliament, so London capped new buildings at just 80 feet, about 10 stories. London had banned the skyscraper before it was even invented. So the city couldn't grow up. It would have to grow out, grow down, and grow beautiful. The demolition began in the slums of Holborn. Between 1901 and 1905, London bulldozed an entire maze of medieval streets, some of them older than 400 years, clearing more than 50 acres of the old city. This was not a renovation. This was surgery. In their place rose Kingsway, a 100-foot-wide boulevard with an electric tram tunnel running directly beneath it, opened by King Edward VII in 1905. Then came the reface. The aging Regent Street was ripped down and rebuilt in gleaming white Portland stone. And in 1906, the Ritz Hotel opened, hiding a secret. One of the first true steel frames in London, a skeleton shipped in from Belgium that held the entire building up by itself. From now on, behind almost every proud stone facade in London hid an invisible cage of steel. In 1909, an American showman named Gordon Selfridge used that same trick to open a colossal department store on Oxford Street and practically invented modern shopping in the process, giving the world the idea that the customer is always right. But the boldest move of all went straight down. If London could not grow upward, it would grow underground. Between 1906 and 1907, 3 deep electric railways roared to life beneath the streets, the ancestors of today's Bakerloo, Piccadilly, and Northern lines. Around 50 brand new stations appeared, wrapped in glossy oxblood red tiles. Londoners descended into a whole new underground world, and the age of the tube had begun. By the 1910s, London wasn't just modernizing, it was showing off. As the capital of an empire that covered a quarter of the globe, it dressed itself up for royalty. The Mall was rebuilt as a grand ceremonial avenue, crowned in 1911 by the towering Admiralty Arch and the marble Victoria Memorial. And in 1913, Buckingham Palace was refaced to give us the palace front the whole world knows today. Civic giants rose, too. Work began on County Hall, the colossal new seat of London's government, while the Port of London Authority raised a mighty headquarters to run what was then the busiest harbor on Earth. And then, in 1914, everything stopped. The First World War drained London of its men and its materials. Building sites froze, half-finished monuments stood waiting for years, but the war also brought something no city on Earth had ever faced before. Look up. In 1915, giant German Zeppelin airships drifted silently over London and began dropping bombs out of the night sky. For the first time in human history, a great city was being attacked from the air. Across the war, these raids would kill more than 1,400 people in Britain and change forever what a city had to fear. London survived. But it staggered out of the war exhausted, scarred, and full of half-built dreams. The 1920s were about recovery and reinvention. First, London finished what the war had interrupted. County Hall finally opened in 1922. The Port of London building was completed in the very same year. The city was catching its breath. Then it began to boom. And the biggest change of all was invisible from the street because it was happening beneath it. The underground was no longer just transport. It was a machine for building a bigger London. Electric trains let people live miles from their jobs, and the suburbs exploded outward along the tracks, spreading like veins into the countryside in a brand new world the railways branded Metroland. In just 10 years, Greater London swelled from 7.4 million people to over 8 million. Up in the West End, an entire era was quietly dying. Britain's aristocrats, crushed by brutal new taxes, could no longer afford their enormous Park Lane palaces, so one by one they sold them off. Developers tore the great mansions down and, in their place, raised the last word in luxury. Soaring hotels like Grosvenor House, and soon after, the Dorchester. The homes of dukes became five-star hotels. And finally, very carefully, London began to build tall. In 1925, Adelaide House rose beside London Bridge as arguably the city's first real high-rise. Then, in 1929, architect Charles Holden completed 55 Broadway, the striking new headquarters of the Underground, built directly on top of a tube station and, at 15 floors, the tallest office building in the entire city. It even triggered a public scandal, the nude stone figures carved onto its walls by the sculptor Jacob Epstein so outraged proper London society that Holden reportedly offered to resign. But even it still bowed beneath St. Paul's, because London had found its own answer. It would become modern, but it would never surrender its low human skyline. The 1930s were when modern London finally arrived in full color. A dazzling new style had swept in from Paris, all chrome, glass, and razor-sharp geometry. They called it Art Deco. In 1932, the Daily Express building stunned the city, wrapped head to toe in shimmering black glass, unlike anything London had ever seen. That same year, the BBC opened Broadcasting House and began beaming the voice of Britain out across the planet. And out in the suburbs, the gleaming white Hoover building turned an ordinary factory into a Deco palace. London even crept a little higher. Between 1932 and 1937, Charles Holden built Senate House, a vast tower of pale stone rising 19 stories over Bloomsbury. And here is something most people don't know. That cold, brooding building so unsettled the author George Orwell that it is widely believed to be his model for the sinister Ministry of Truth in his novel, 1984. There was another quiet revolution, too. In 1931, a young draftsman named Harry Beck redrew the entire tangled underground as a clean, colorful circuit diagram, throwing out real geography altogether. He was paid just 5 guineas for it. Today, his map is one of the most copied designs on the planet. But the true crown jewel, the symbol of everything London had become, rose on the south bank of the Thames. Look at this reconstruction. Between 1929 and 1935, Battersea Power Station climbed into the sky, a mountain of brick wrapped around a giant steel frame with 2 colossal chimneys towering more than 300 feet. It was shaped by Giles Gilbert Scott, the same man who designed Britain's iconic red telephone box, and it became one of the largest brick buildings in all of Europe, with an Art Deco interior so lavish that a coal-burning power plant felt like a place of worship. It was a brick cathedral of power, and it told the world that London was, at last, fully modern. By 1939, the transformation was complete. In just 40 years, London had torn out its worst slums, carved boulevards of white stone, buried a world-class railway, filled its skyline with Art Deco, and built a cathedral of electricity, all without ever losing the low, dignified silhouette that made London, London. And then the sirens came. Within a year, the bombs of the Blitz would rain down and test every single brick of it. That old 80-foot height limit would cling on all the way until the 1960s. But the modern city we still walk through today was born right here, in these 4 extraordinary decades, in the final calm before the world set it on fire.